Today I want to tell some stories about color, which is weird. Jeff asked me last night, he was like, I was thinking about coordinating the intro with the sermon. What's the theme? I said, color. He said, well, that's kind of broad. What do you mean? Well, it's about color. It's like people? No, just color. Anyway. So we're going to play a couple of games first because color is one of these things that you see color and we have this sort of objective, oh, that's blue. Oh, no, that's sky blue and rose red and all of these things, right? But in reality, color is entirely subjective. I don't know if you've ever thought about it before, but you should try this and think about how you know what green is, and if that's green to somebody else, or if that actually looks blue to them, but they all know grass is green, right? So we just call that green, and it looks green to us. So anyway, here's this first slide. We're going to look at, I don't have a clicker anymore, so Dean's helping me out. Can you find that, Dean? Uh-oh. Yeah, okay, so this first slide. So here's how perspective matters and how subjective color is. So those two small boxes, because they have a different background and a different color around them, you would describe them differently? I don't know, they look kind of similar now, don't they? Now they look the same. Okay, well, if you saw this in a book, you would think... those are the same colors. They're actually cut from the same piece of paper and put onto this thing. This guy, Albert, likes to play with colors and light and make you think about things. So let's try the next one, Dean. So here's what we're going to do on this one. So I need you to stare at this black dot on your left-hand side we're going to do this as long as you can hold out, for 20 to 30 seconds. And then you're going to switch and look at the other side and see what happens to you. What happened? It reverses. What is your mind doing to you? That's just a black dot on a white background, but it looks like yellow diamonds. Anyway, our minds do these weird things with colors, and it matters sort of how colors interact with the things around them, and it's completely subjective, and we think about defining these different things. But also what color does, and the reason you'll notice every week we have colors lit up around our stage. Color gives energy. It gives moods. It has some sort of force behind it. It increases creativity. There was a study done in Australia that looked at it looked at the cloud cover for the day and the way that affects the colors that you see, and your memory and your creativity. And all the bright colors of a nice sunny day gives you body this sort of happy whatever, and you don't need to look for things. And so they did this study and found that your memory functions better on a cloudy day. This is why it's good to live in Maple Ridge or Lower Mainland. Your memory actually functions better on a cloudy day. Your creativity is boosted on a cloudy day because, and this is the thought behind it, because you have to find another way to sort of boost your own mood when the colors aren't there for the day. And so these colors make a difference in how we do things. As sort of an amateur photographer, color, like I'm always fiddling with the color on my camera. And so I will pull up my camera ready to take a shot, and I have to set the white balance. And if you're moving from place to place, you have to set the white balance every time you take a shot, or you get a crappy picture, right? And Jenna gets terribly annoyed with me because I've got her and the kids or whatever it is happening and stopped, okay? Because I've paused everything. Wait, this is the perfect picture. And I take it, I'm like, I don't really like the white balance. Let me adjust it a little bit. And then I take another one. It's just not quite there. And by the end of it, we're all frustrated because the kids are no longer sitting still and the color never quite gets just right. And Jenna's angry that I just paused life for 15 minutes. Color, like, it is so impactful. But the thing is, a greatly colored photo has all of this depth and richness to it. Whereas if you take it with your phone, it may or may not come out right. They're pretty smart these days. But color changes the way you interact with that photo. In photography, there's a couple of things that you think about. There's a time of the day called golden hour. Is this anyone heard the term? So golden hour or the golden hours is the hour right after sunrise and the hour right before sunset. And what happens in this hour is the way the sun is setting or rising, and the distance and the curvature and everything that happens, it changes the colors in your photos. It changes the colors of what you see too. But in those moments, you get these gorgeous photos that have unique color, and everything that looked boring before is now dynamic and illustrative and just energizing. I had some sunglasses that did this. You should get some brown tinted sunglasses. It's amazing. The last thing that happened before we moved out of Maple Ridge is somebody stole my sunglasses out of my car. Just as one final gift. Off to Pitt Meadows. But these colors matter to us. They change the way we experience life and the way we experience mood. And without light illuminating those colors, there is nothing. Without that light happening, there is nothing there. And so light, as it comes, illuminates these colors, and we get different times of the day and different moments and different colors of lighting. We've got colors of lighting that happen up here to make the band look nice and pretty. That all happens because light illuminates different colors. It was a time of wonder and excitement. And if you were a scientist or an artist or a creative or really anything in the 18th and then the 19th centuries, everything was fresh. I get so angry when I read about these guys in the 19th century and the 18th century that are doing work. Somebody that's a scholar and has put out these amazing works in religion, on biblical studies, on theologies and different things, has also done work in some sort of biological field or something completely random, because it was a time of discovery. And everywhere you turned, people had multiple degrees from different types of universities, and they were learning science over here and art over here, and the amount of discovery that happened in that 150 years or 200 years was just phenomenal. So all of the philosophers and the science and different things that were coming about all happened in this little short period of time. And so it wasn't uncommon for you to be able to study one thing and then study something else and really produce new thoughts and new ideas out of a scientific community, and then change fields entirely and reinvent another field also. It was just fascinating. There was a poet named, I'm going to get his full name wrong, but let me read it. Johann Wolfgang von Goethe. we all know the poet, right? But he also, because of this great time of discovery, got to dabble in the sciences and different things. And so his works were just across the board. So he had come up, he had risen as this amazing poet, and he was known across Europe for his poetic abilities. But whenever he weighed in on something, it was finalized. Whenever he had, there was a dispute about if you could invoke Goethe, you could in fact solve the dispute, because he had that kind of authority on all kinds of things. So he was a poet, an artist, but also he looked into some of these scientific things. And one of his favorite sciences was meteorology. Because in meteorology it was this sort of science of observation and contemplation. So you could sit out and experience nature and just do your science while observing and taking down notes and contemplating how the clouds work and how water morphs from water into the atmosphere to become a cloud and the different levels and all kinds of things. You could do all kinds of contemplative work as a meteorologist. And so he had this sort of fascination with meteorology. And there was this young amateur meteorologist. So many names today that I'm just not going to come up with all of them. This young meteorologist, here we go. Nope, it's gone. You'll be fine without it. He's a young, amateur, nameless meteorologist who wrote in England. And ironically, he takes this contemplative work. He's not doing this professionally. He is just thinking about life and clouds and the way the environment works. And he writes a 32-page pamphlet on clouds. And he self-publishes it, and he begins distributing it from just with his friends. His friends love it, and so they begin distributing it to others. And the first thing that goes viral, this is before the telegraph, before anything that we could communicate quickly, this pamphlet moves like wildfire through Europe, through Great Britain and Europe and all over. And all of a sudden, this young under 30 guy has classified for the first time clouds. Did you learn about them? The nimbus and cumulus nimbus and cirrus and I don't know. There's lots of them, right? These are all his words. He took to his creative energies and his meteorologist's contemplative work, and he puts all of these words on paper. And as an amateur meteorologist, and he uses the Latin, and this upsets some people. So he's starting to get flack now because he's used Latin words, and so they're trying to translate them in different places. And it's Goethe who steps in and says, hold on a second. And he writes this massive defense of this young boy, guy, whatever, and his use of Latin and the beauty that comes from his work. And he writes about how fantastic his words are and how it shapes his own creativity and inspires him to be a better poet and a better artist. And this then is published all over Europe and Great Britain. Guess what? Matter settled. You still use those words today. You don't know what they mean, some sort of Latin thing. Hundreds of years later, we're still using these words because Goethe stepped in and illuminated this guy's work and gave light to it and gave a allowed these colors of this beautiful language to flow and to be part of the meteorology world. Because some German poet, hundreds of miles away, decided that this was so incredible that others needed to maintain the consistency that this young man had brought forth. And that's not all. What happens after that is Goethe writes him some fan mail. And he thought it was a joke. He thought, one of my friends have put me on, and they've written this letter and signed it as Goethe. But truthfully, he had written this work, and he had written these words, to find yourself in the infinite, you must distinguish and then combine. Therefore my winged song thanks the man who distinguished cloud from cloud. Those are Goethe's words about this young man writing about clouds. Goethe continues his work, and he continues to dabble in different areas, but it was that piece of illumination that sort of gives you an idea of who he was and the way he lit this world of this young meteorologist. And he continues to work with ideas and colors and science, and actually he publishes a book a few years later called The Theory of Color. I think, oh, there it is. So you've probably never heard of this book. It was widely read, mostly because in it he decided that Newton was wrong. You shouldn't really do that. He decided that Newton had colors wrong, and so he put forth a new scientific idea on why colors work the way they do. Instead of light being the factor, you actually pull darkness or black out of the color to give those different colors, which is not how things work. Scientifically, he was off base. But creatively, he brought new light to the way we think about color. So this color wheel, which you've probably used to shape your photos, or a pen in some app that you use, or to change what color you pick on your Word document, this is his color wheel. That was his idea. We modified it just a little bit. 200 years later, we're still working with his color wheel. This random poet from Germany who dabbled in the sciences felt so strongly about the way color functions in our world that he wrote an entire book about color and the way it functions and moves in our lives and things like that. One of the interesting pieces of that is that in it he also brought forth this idea of psychology and color and how they mix and the moods. So he had sections on moods and color. He writes, light and darkness, brightness and obscurity, or, if a more general expression is preferred, light and its absence are necessary to the production of color. Color itself is a degree of darkness. In its highest purity, it always carries with it, this is the color yellow, the nature of brightness, and has a serene, gay, softly exciting character. And he goes on to work through the different colors and why they matter and what they do to our psychology in weirdly superstitious kind of ways in the midst of this science and book of creativity. Ironically, his work was entirely dismissed because of his contrasting with Newton. And it took a few dozen years, I think, actually, for someone else to illuminate his work, to light it up and say, okay, so he got the science wrong, but the creativity involved in this work, the wonder that is produced, the joy and excitement that is produced when we think about color in new ways is beautiful, and we've totally missed the mark in how we think about and categorize and classify color. So in a weird way, Goethe then illuminated by someone else a few years down the line to give light to his work on colors. See, what's fascinating about this to me is his sense of awe and wonder. I think colors do that to us, and he nailed it on the head when he digs into what colors can do for us, against us, with us. And everywhere we go, when we see these bright, vibrant colors, we're enthused, we're given energy. And when we're brought this gloomy day, it impacts our mood, it impacts our soul. And so we move a little slower, we think a little deeper. The contemplative work often comes out on a nice, gloomy day because it's required of us. And those thoughts and those things were pushed through with someone who saw so much awe and wonder out of color. I think next, just to someone who came to the scene a few thousand years ago and asked us to look at him as the light. And in one sense, you can think about the light giving us literally a pathway to follow. But in another sense, light gives us color and vibrancy to life. And I look at the way Jesus moves and the way Jesus acts and the people he talks to and the excitement that builds around him. I think maybe he's talking about color. You know, when Jesus goes from town to town, immediately he is swarmed with people. At one point, there's so many people gathered around him, thousands of people, because what he has is so invigorating and so exciting and so colorful and vivid that they just have to come hear this person. He is surrounded by thousands of people, and they back him up into a sea. And he steps on a boat to get away, to find some peace, to find some alone time. At another point, he's come to this village, and there's so many people that a man of short stature, the Bible recounts, John recounts, has to climb a tree. Now, I don't know what this is like, because I can see over most people, but he has to climb a tree to see this man Jesus, because he's heard so many things about him. And Jesus spots him, and he yells to him, and he says, "I'm coming to have dinner at your place today." And he spends the next, hour, 2 hours. I don't know how much time Jesus has. He seems very busy, but he spends the next few hours illuminating the world for this man so that he can see in a new way, and giving color to what looked very bland and quite frankly stilted. Everywhere Jesus went, he lighted the way for people to see something new, something better, something richer, something more colorful. And so when we think about all these different ways that color captures our essence and the wonder produced at sunset or in the sea when the light glistens off the ocean. Color changes that and gives us wonder and awe. And I wonder how much we're noticing that.